Hi all, this is Simona Rich, and in this video I'm going to read out my article on the Gemini Ascendant meaning. Gemini Ascendant, also called Gemini Rising, gives to a person his or her physical appearance and outward behavior. So basically, some people who don't know astrology think that now I'm talking about sun sign, but actually I'm not talking about the sun sign. I'm talking about the ascendant. So if you know your birth hour, the hour that you were born, then you can determine what your ascendant is by entering your details into websites such as astro.com or astrotheme.com, and then looking at the AC at the left side of the chart, the AC letters, and determining what sign there is, and then you will know that that's your ascendant. This sign influences your outward behavior as well as your physical appearance. The presence of other planets close to the Gemini ascendant will alter that appearance, and then it will no longer be a typical Gemini appearance when there are more planets in the first house, especially close to the ascendant. They will alter the classic Gemini appearance. Also, if the rising sign is afflicted or weak, then in a man's chart, the sun's position should be examined for the appearance, whilst in a woman's, the moon's. Though both the sun and moon in the charts of both men and women will have some influence on the appearance and outward behavior, and usually the moon stands for the body and the sun for the ego, for how you feel within. But particularly in a man's chart, the sun is more responsible for the appearance, together with the ascendant. Of course, ascendant largely determines it, whilst in a woman's chart it's the moon. The locations of other planets also need to be taken into consideration, as each planet rules a particular part of the body. For example, the muscular system is ruled by Mars, and the appearance of a mouth by Mercury. So for example, if we find Sagittarius on the ascendant, then the person tends to get larger, but that person's moon is in Capricorn, then he's likely to be more thin than usually people with Sagittarius rising are. So checking which signs such planets are placed in can give us more detailed information about one's appearance. The natal chart ruler of Gemini on the cusp of the first house is Mercury. And one should look at where Mercury is located in the natal chart to be able to give further details about one's character and appearance. So we can see that not only the ascendant sign itself, the moon and the sun contributes to one's appearance. Mainly the ascendant does that, but also the sun and the moon. But also the ruler of the ascendant, the ruling planet of the ascendant, called the chart ruler, is also responsible, also contributes to how one looks and how one behaves in the public. Gemini represents the air element, and the minds of Gemini rising people are perfect examples of that. They ever wonder, ready to take on the color of any impression it comes in touch with. They are born entertainers and are very interesting to talk to because they usually know a bit about everything. They can be so versatile and sometimes random that you cannot help but get entertained by them. So here is a great Gemini example. It's Maxim Galkin. If you speak Russian, if you know Russian culture, you might know this television personality. He's a comedian, very funny, and we can see a classical Gemini look, quite pointed chin, narrow face, a long nose, small eyes, and some astrologers say that Geminis have small mouths, but I actually find it the opposite. And Gemini people are quite tall also. They are slender and they have quite long limbs, but I will talk about that later. So we can see that he's a good representation of Gemini, and actually he's not, I don't know if he's Gemini rising, he could be, I don't know his birth hour, but his Mercury and Sun are in Gemini, making it quite unaltered, so it would represent quite a pure type. But it might be that he's also Gemini rising up, I'm not sure, it could be, it's likely. And he's also married to an entertainer, so that's good for Geminis because they seek variety. Geminis usually have an excellent command of speech, and therefore they can persuade you. This makes them great sellers. Unevolved Geminis may use lies to sell you things and you don't need that you don't need, or which aren't what they were described. Pure Gemini types aren't sensual, and you may get little affection from them, but again, the entire chart needs to be taken into consideration. But mainly Geminis are not the sensual kind. Their activity is mental. They process everything with their minds, and therefore sometimes they get accused of being unfeeling. This is quite true for pure types, but those influenced by water signs will be more emotional. Gemini rising people are always curious and are interested in new people and experiences. They are interested in them to be entertained and to learn something from them. But their interest may not be long-lasting. If something more interesting presents itself, Geminis may start paying attention to the novelty, with the exception if a person is always very interesting. This doesn't necessarily have to manifest in intimate relationships, as Geminis are not sensual unless strong aspects modify this trait, so they might not cheat you, but they will have the need to always be mentally stimulated, and that's why they like to seek out novelties and be involved in many pursuits at the same time. And here we see Mick Jagger. He's a Gemini rising, modified by the presence of Saturn in the first house, and Saturn doesn't really give good appearance. I saw some exceptions, but Saturn usually doesn't give good appearance. And also he has Uranus conjunct his ascendant from the 12th house. We can see the narrow face and straight nose of a Gemini, and he's also quite tall, over 1.78 meters. If a Gemini was properly educated, the thirst for novelty will manifest as craving for knowledge instead. So he won't be too much focused on getting entertained, but on becoming smarter. However, he's likely to be pursuing various kinds of knowledge at the same time, so his knowledge of one subject doesn't get deep. Because of this reason, they are often accused of being superficial. They are also accused of having no heart, lacking loyalty, and being ungrateful. It's not that they are consciously doing something to deserve such labels. They just don't operate the way that the more feeling types of people do. They get along with various types of people. There are no people that they really dislike. That's because Gemini is a mercurial sign, and Mercury is the planet that adapts to anything, yet is not really changed by anything. And we can see that in our earthly Mercury, which we can find in a thermometer. It rises and falls according to the heat, but is unchanged by it. So for example, Mercury rising, I made a mistake, this should be Gemini. Gemini rising people can suddenly get emotional, but that's a surface emotion, and then something catches their fancy and their mood changes instantly because that previous emotion had no effect on them. And people who are ruled by the planets that are more of a watery, earthy, or even fiery nature may find sometimes difficult to switch. You can't switch so fast, but air signs, especially Gemini, can just switch fast from one emotion to another, but those emotions aren't deep anyway. They're sometimes they're just acted, sometimes they're surface emotion, that's why it's easy for them to switch. Gemini ascendants have a very strong ability to adjust to the circumstances or change them so that they benefit from wherever they are. They don't like to attack others, and there is no strong resistance to any influence. They are excellent critics and observers of small changes. So when, for example, something small changes in an environment, in a person's appearance, Geminis will notice that. And that's why occupations that require attention to detail are good for them. And here we have another Gemini rising, Michelle Pfeiffer, who is now 61, yet she retains a slender figure, and I think she looks good for her age, and Geminis usually look younger than they are. Geminis rarely get attached to people, and they don't complain much about the circumstances they find themselves in, because they're often not interested in deepening the relationships with others. Neither others get too much attached to them. In marriage, they make friendly and useful partners. The main problem in marriage arises when a partner expects too much of a Gemini, and some like Cancer people, they expect a lot of their loved ones. So Gemini might not prove to be a good partner for such people. A Gemini rising person may not be fully giving of himself, and this may be perceived as lack of care. He's just this type of person, and he's not consciously withholding himself from being too affectionate. So this is important to know before marrying an individual with a Gemini rising. Geminis do best in quiet environments because of their high nervous sensitivity. So if the environment is also charged with too much active energy or something like this, then Geminis might get too active mentally and also sometimes physically. Geminis are childlike, and it's beautiful that they retain their youthfulness in the way that they think and behave till old age. Their mind is extremely logical, and the intellect is not influenced by emotions. This allows them to solve problems and arrive at right conclusions, but some people can be shocked by the coldness of the intellect, especially the ones who are influenced by water signs of the zodiac. And here we have another Gemini rising, Louis Tomlinson, and he has that boyish look that Geminis sometimes have. Geminis may look highly creative, but actually what they do is combine existing bits of knowledge to form it into a new whole. So they actually are excellent learners. When they're interested into something, they can pick up things very fast, and then they're able to combine the vast amounts of knowledge that they have, and that looks like creativity, but actually it's a combination of things that they already acquired from somewhere. Their main problem is the lack of a single focus, and this actually cannot be a problem at all. It can be an advantage. For example, if they find work that requires variety, for example, if they become vloggers talking about many things, then they won't get bored and the audience will be highly entertained. So it's a win-win situation. So I think it's good. I actually got this tip from listening to Gary Vee, that he's also the kind of person that likes variety, and I do too. And I could not work in a single line of work doing the same things all the time, because I would get bored. So it's important for people as such to find occupations that would allow variety, and then you will enjoy, and others also will enjoy your work, because you are doing it with love, with happiness. The nervous system of Geminis is very sensitive. All their impressions are processed mentally, and they may suffer from being inattentive and distracted, as well as unable to sleep if they are engaged in too many activities or put through too much stress. Now, advice for Gemini children, and this is important for people who have Gemini rising children. To be happiest, they always need to be occupied with something. If they are not busy, they will get bored, unhappy, and may start doing something that's not good, like getting involved with the wrong company or in harmful activities, and sometimes that also applies to adult Gemini rising people. So this is a lesson for all parents who have Gemini children. Keep them busy with beneficial activities so that they don't take the wrong path. And I think even the Jewish children are taught, the Jewish parents are taught by their holy book. I don't know, I think it was written in maybe not in Torah, in some other book of Judaism, that it's important to keep the children busy so that they stay out of taking bad roads or something like this. Also, unless some positive astrological indicators are there, Geminis may lack moral principles and therefore use their intelligence for any sort of activity that they are interested in, be them moral or not. So again, parents are strongly advised to instill strong moral principles in Gemini children. They should also be encouraged to be grateful for what they have, because their mind is quick and nature changeable, so they may get quickly dissatisfied with their toys, friends, or the environment. But if parents encourage them to appreciate what they have, instead of growing up to be dissatisfied individuals, they will grow up to appreciate who they are and what they have. They should also be encouraged to express themselves physically, and they may want to express themselves through acting or making up stories. So acting or theater classes may be very useful to them and will satisfy their dual natures. Also, parents should take great care to select right friends for him, because he will take on the qualities of people he finds himself with. It's also important to carefully watch for their talents, because due to their changeable and adaptable natures, they may choose occupations suggested to them rather than selecting something truly suitable for them. Also, since their imagination is quick and powerful, parents should never tell them any scary stories, as they will be too frightened to sleep, because the imagination starts to work and they will start creating all kinds of scary images in their minds, and they won't be able to sleep. They will be too scared. They need plenty of fresh air and a lot of sleep, though sleep for small children may be spread throughout the 24-hour period, so they may not be able just to sleep for many hours a night. They might wake up and then they will sleep again, and they might feel sleepy daytime, and they should sleep then. If parents follow this advice, their Gemini child should grow up into a healthy adult. Otherwise, they may grow up to be nervous and dissatisfied. Now, Gemini rising appearance, I did talk about it a little, but here's more information. This sign is so unstable and changeable that any planet present close to the ascendant can strongly alter a person's appearance. But pure Gemini rising people have very active, sparkling eyes, active body, and strong limbs. Often they have pointed chins and straight noses. The body is usually tall and face more on the narrower side. The eyes are often gray or hazel or rather small. And this is a good example of a Gemini rising person, Kristen Stewart. And we can see that her eyes are small. I read that it's green eyes, but she has some hazel color also. And she has straight nose, and she has pointy chin, so this is, and also narrow face, so I think she's a good representation of a Gemini rising person. They are flexible and thin, and this thinness is maintained by their constant movement and interest in the mental world more than the physical. They look younger than their age. For example, my boyfriend is a Gemini, and he looks around 7 years younger than he really is, and when he tells his real age to people, people just don't believe it. Unusual length of arms, fingers, and legs is another feature of Geminis. Usually hands are thin, with notable bones and knuckles. Once you know this look, you will never mistake it. So for example, Osho has that pronounced look of his hands, and we can see prominent knuckles and bones here showing. So this is a very typical Gemini hand, and the arm itself also is Gemini. And when he was young, when Osho was young, you can see that he had very straight and narrow nose. So that's again another sign of a Gemini rising person. Gemini rising people should be careful with their lungs, as they are delicate. They should definitely avoid smoking. They should ideally be living in unpolluted environments, as plenty of fresh air is important to them. So that's all the information I have for you about Gemini rising people. And if you know more, features of them, then please share that in the comments below this video. Thank you for watching. Take care.